Welcome to this special edition of Talking Toughness. I suppose it's a special edition because together with colleagues Professor Peter Clough and Dr. John Perry, what we're going to try and do is reflect on the past 12 months in terms of mental toughness, and then share what we think is going to be on the agenda for 2023 and beyond.
If I start looking backwards, I leave other thought to look forward. But looking back at the last year, I think we have a lot of stuff which is innovative. So it's innovation and consolidation. So those are two driving forces that make sure that we're secure in what we're saying, make sure we develop the model carefully, but then explore completely different avenues. Related around diversity, creativity. So there's lots of ideas, but we need that foundation to be maintained. And we welcome all the input we've got from people over the year, the ideas, the concepts, the discussions, and the questions.
Yeah, and I like that sense of consolidating. I know something you've been looking at, Peter, with the was it 10 Commandments or whatever? Essentially identifying terms that we know we can stand over and say these are empirically evidenced. Because one of the things we see in a lot of sort of the positive psychology world, of course, is you can have a sound psychological construct, but as it becomes more popular, it can it can run away sometimes. So one of the things I know we're really keen to do is to always ensure what we're promoting is evidence based.
Now that's become something that's crucially important for us and will be increasingly important in the future. I think we have to be a bit bolder about challenging some of the faddist ideas out there because we've got a position from which we can do that. I think if I looked at what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, I think the development of the 8 factors has been a very significant development. I think thanks to John, it's brought a new word into my vocabulary, nuance, because it's managing to grasp the complexity at the heart of the mental toughness concept and yet enable us to be able to access it simply. The other thing it's doing is every time we do a significant development with the mental toughness concept, we then spend the next 3, 4, 5 years learning so much more about it. And that's what I'm finding. The last 12 months, we have learned so much about the mental toughness concept that we didn't really know before. I mean, it's helping to clarify our thinking about some aspects of the concept. So for me, the development of the 8 factors has been a big development. The interest in mental toughness kicked off globally. We're seeing a surge of interest, especially in North America, which really pleases me, but also in other parts of the world. So we've launched, as we all know, the global cross-cultural study. The fact that we can get somewhere between 70 and 100 universities interested tells you something. We now can make a lot of people sit up and pay attention to us. The last 12, 24 months have been pretty much like perhaps the past 10 years. We're on a kind of a long, hard journey to make the world aware of what we've got.
On the cross-cultural study there, Doug, just to catch everybody up, essentially, it comes back to this idea that we're often asked if there's any cultural differences in mental toughness. It's something that coaches get a lot of the time. Understandably so, as people are picking up and delivering it to parts of the world that are new. And when we're asked, the answer is always, I don't know, because I don't want to just guess. So because we didn't have any empirical evidence to say whether there was any cultural differences other than things that were kind of opportunistic bits of data, which can sometimes lead to false claims. So we set about measuring mental toughness in 40 odd different countries. So that's ongoing at the moment. So we'll be able to report back to people if there are cultural differences and what those cultural differences might be. But for me, the really exciting element of that is the connections we've made with researchers in those universities all across the globe. And I know many of those are interested in continuing to research mental toughness and probably have their own area of interest. So I'm really this kind of network set up where we can help researchers to collaborate and answer some of the big questions that we have around, also be able to take it in a direction specific to their own interests and their own expertise.
But I suppose we also ought to mention the emergence of the advisory board. So that's, we've always valued, and it's always been important that we get feedback from practitioners. We need to know what the concept and the tools look like when people actually use them in real world situations. But now we've got an advisory board where anything between 15 and 25 people meet once a quarter to discuss what they're experiencing, where we should go next. And that over the 2 years has progressed very, very nicely. So that's another nice development. That's spawning a number of other things. So we've got a number of books being created. I guess they're how-to guides rather than sort of fundamental books about theory or anything like that. They're much more about, well, if I want to use it in coaching, how best can I use it in coaching? And we're finding that people are looking for that. They can understand the concept, they know what they're doing. What they really want is help in, well, how can I use this concept in what I'm doing? So, Peter, looking forward, any thoughts?
Yeah, looking forward. What excites me is the dull stuff. It says more about me than the rest of the team, I think. And the dull stuff is doing this background research, this evidence. The great danger is falling for your own publicity, and we're very, very careful to make sure we can evidence what we say. So there's lots of exciting possibilities, and as you say, the advisory group is a place where we can discuss openly and speculate and have some really interesting discussions. The hard yards, we've got the pizza image and we've got the iceberg. The iceberg is most of what we do is hidden beneath the water. The amount of effort we're putting in is increasing almost exponentially. So as a concept gets more popular, as it gets more traction, it becomes more and more important that we dot the I's and cross the T's. So looking forward, I think what we've all learned over the last 2 years is we don't know what's going to happen. So it's meeting the challenges head on when they come. But we wouldn't have thought about COVID. We wouldn't have thought about Ukraine. All this stuff is moving around. But what really excites me is the feedback we get from practitioners, because what we want people to do is ask us questions and challenge us. And it's by that process of challenging us, we develop a more robust model and more robust measures. So, I think all three of us get emails on a daily basis when my natural reaction is just to say, well, that's cool. I've just been talking to somebody from rugby school, and as a rugby fan, where they developed the sport initially, they want some help with their rugby club, and you think, cool. But they're only contacting us and interacting with us because of the security and the professionalism of the underlying work, I think.
And we've a lot to come now in the next year or two around that. We've the development of the 8 factors, that kind of evolution from the MTQ48 to MTQ plus, isn't just a development in measuring it and getting new scores. But for me, looking at the data and being very close to it, you start to see kind of more common profiles emerging, and it really gives a sense then of trying to interpret someone's mental toughness as a whole profile. I'm really interested to see where that goes. I know a question I've posed before, we don't have the answers yet, is like, would you rather be a balanced 5 or 6 or a spiky 7 or 8? You know, is it better to have a sort of a balanced profile? If you have high levels of achievement orientation and low levels of emotional control or confidence and abilities, is it good to have strengths, or is it better? Are you better off kind of being a level-headed soul with 4 or 5 on everything? So there's interesting areas we can look at there, with a ton of other research going on. Some of it's conceptual, and it's looking at developing that kind of thing, and the model, and our understanding how it links to personality and other constructs. And some of it's applied to specific areas such as education or sport or health as well. So we've a lot going forward, which is great. And what's really confusing about it is that we'll actually have far more coming up as well, because the interest that we get from other researchers is kind of growing exponentially.
And then from where I'm sitting, the practitioner is playing a bigger and bigger part there in 2 ways. One is there's more and more demand, as I said before, from practitioners for guidance and support, and we need to provide that to them. So we will be looking at developing products that help practitioners to apply the concept in all the different areas that they work. And that might include, well, it will include probably developing 2 new books. We've got our long-term bestseller, Developing Mental Toughness. But I think, John, it was you who spotted this. We should really have a book about understanding mental toughness. And that has, kind of more emphasis on understanding the 8 factors, how they actually work, because people miss the interplay between the 8 factors. So quite a lot of people just look at the 8 factors and see them as 8 separate pieces of information. They combine in so many interesting ways, as you've just suggested. And then I think if I were to look at the demand out there, and it's a demand that's been provoked by COVID, I think there's a demand for something on leadership. The idea of resilient and positive leadership, to be able to guide people through out of the situation we've been in, through other difficult situations. I can see that rising in the agenda. We're certainly getting a lot of demand for it. And then, again, coming back to the practitioners, we are beginning to build that global community. We, as you know, through the podcasts, through the different forums that we're establishing, we are getting people genuinely interested in engaging with us to kind of take the concept forward. And I can see we will probably start developing special interest groups to allow people to go and explore more deeply something that's of particular interest to them. We are actually beginning to see a sustained and, I would say, a more grounded interest in the mental toughness concept from the world of education. And I'm talking here mainly about secondary education. And people are beginning to understand that if we develop people early in their lives, we might well save ourselves a lot of pain and heartache later on. So I think that those are the things that I can see coming on the horizon for the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And the adolescent, the education, it just makes sense. We know that whatever area of human behavior or psychology you're interested in, people are more malleable when they're younger. And then, we become more stubborn as we get older. And this is where I think regularly go on this idea of it's probably more about understanding mental toughness than developing it, because I think the development of mental toughness experientially, getting a grounding and understanding mental toughness when people encounter those challenging achievement situations or adversity, that's where they're able to kind of draw on that knowledge, and the more I understand mental toughness, the more I think that kind of psychoeducation, if you will, of understanding what mental toughness is and understanding your own mental toughness. A bit like people talk about mental health literacy a lot these days, actually prepares you more so than a toolkit with, off the shelf goal setting and imagery kind of stuff. And I think that really, to me, that represents a sort of a maturity, understand of a very complex construct. And the other thing you mentioned there, both Doug and Peter, the feedback we get from practitioners is so helpful. To my mind, we're very rare in that our academic endeavors and research is largely driven by the views of practice and end users. And as a result of that, our understanding and our measurement evolves. And really, it makes so much sense. When you look popular psychometric scales, look at so many personality scales are 30, 40, 50 years old, and they don't change. Does that mean our understanding of those things hasn't changed? So I really like, and I'm quite proud of us as a group, the way that we managed to remain open to ideas and improving our understanding, but also how we operationalize, how we can measure it, and then how we can have that measure be practically meaningful, not just numbers on a sheet.
I suppose the big challenge for all of us, and particularly for me, is how patient we have to be to wait for the world to catch up with us sometimes. Because in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we're at the end of 2022, we've had a lot of interest in something that we discovered in 2015, and that was the U-shaped curve in adolescence. The fact that mental toughness goes backwards around the ages of 12, 13, 14 before it starts improving again. And that's been out there for 8 years, 7 or 8 years, and nobody's paid much attention to it. Suddenly, it's something that people want to come and talk to us about. So I guess we've had to learn a little bit of patience, and also perhaps have to think about how do we get our ideas over to other people more effectively. That's another challenge. But I'm not sure. I think people have to be ready for new ideas before you can introduce them to them. So,
yeah, and sometimes ideas. It's not just the people catching up, but the situation changes, and then they become more relevant. Because my daughter's a trainee teacher at the moment, and it's clear in the UK that the 11-year-olds are not fully socialised when they're going to secondary school because they've been off for 2 years, and that most of them are a year behind on the technicalities of their learning, but their behavioural issues are now huge, and unless you're in the school, you don't notice it. So new problems are emerging, and we have new solutions. And as you say, this inverted U ties in nicely to what's going on, but then it doubles down, because a lot of schools are in chaos, and they're into mob management, sadly, in the UK. But it's not the kids' fault or the teachers' fault, but what they thought they knew, they no longer know. And that's what we're ready. But yeah, people have to tell us. And so we go back to that, and we've all said it, it's that patient approach, it's that building approach, but to be ready to meet a new problem when a new problem arises. So other things are cropping up all the time, but I am now totally convinced that mental toughness development and training in schools is really important, and it's far more important than it was 2 years ago. And this now rolls through the school system. These kids are going to go to university and into the job market, and I don't want to be pejorative, but they're different. There's a whole new cohort of people who aren't the same. as people think they are. And you think, okay, but if we lay down the tools we have and the ideas and the concepts we have, other people can spot the possibilities of being able to use them.
And of course, the market they're moving into is different as well. And I suppose the one thing we can be certain about is that the future is always uncertain. I know from my time of being stood at a university open days, and increasingly when I started lecturing, it tended just to be the prospective students, but these days the parents are always the ones at the front of those open days, asking, okay, so what job will they do? And trying to say, well, in the long term, it's probably a job that doesn't yet exist, because they're going to be working in 30 years' time. Who would have most of the prominent jobs now? No one went to college or university 30 years ago to study for those. They simply didn't exist. And with the growth of technology, the globalization, combined with just our absolute blindness to have no idea what the future holds, and I suppose I don't want to start bringing the tone down, but there's a huge climate crisis. Who knows what the future is going to hold? But I'm pretty certain it's going to be completely different to what it is now. So, look, how do we develop our young people for something that we have no idea what it entails?
Well, that's pretty true for even people in adults. My daughter is just qualified as a nurse. She's in her 40s. She will still work for another 25 years, probably, maybe more. So, the whole fabric.
Doug.
Sorry?
So will you.
Possibly. Yeah. I think the essence of everything we've talked about is there is a need for mental toughness. It's a valuable concept. It's a concept we're understanding more and more every day. And there are applications right, left, and centre, almost anywhere you go where people are engaged. This has a role to play. So I guess we'll roll on in the next 12 months. We'll gather here together in about 12 months' time, review what we predicted, how close we were, and there will still be stuff to have a go at in 2024 and beyond.
Sounds right. And I see ourselves like a baby NASA. And by that, I mean, quite a lot of the fundamental research we do, you don't know what use it might have until something happens. So getting these fundamental ideas and concepts and innovative thoughts across, sometimes they sit on a shelf for a long time until the time is right for them. We're trying to get ahead of the curve, putting tools, techniques, measures, concepts into place which can be used at fairly short notice. Things will change. And even if we look at where we are, they've already fundamentally shifted. The idea of when people talk about Generation Z or baby boomers, that's now all in the bin to some extent, because this new group of people are just so different than the people before them. We're wondering where we are. So it's a part of our job. A main part of our job is to respond to demands and to get ahead of this curve. We're trying to future-proof ourselves when we don't know the future. So there's a challenge for all of us.
And what better way to prepare yourself for uncertainty than to be tough enough to know that you'll be fine regardless of what an uncertain future holds.
Well, thank you. I think that's a great point at which to finish. I think, Peter, you've almost given us the title for a third book, but it's already been taken, War of the Worlds. You make it sound like there's a whole pile of aliens coming towards us.
Well, I think, it's... We have to think differently and more flexibly. We can't do the same things because, in the UK, they were talking this morning about what happened to the 600,000 people who are no longer financially active or in the workforce because their views have changed. They don't want to do it anymore. And this younger generation start off not wanting to do it. So, but we have to switch to meet them, not the other way around. Otherwise, we have a problem. But yeah, War of the World would be a good title. Yeah, I'm a science fiction fan. Midwich Cuckoo strikes a chord. We have to be ready for these differences. And yeah, I think that's been my major learning point. If you talk about diversity, talk about what's going on, but even expanding that more, we have to be less rigid. And as you get older, it's harder to be less rigid. But being involved in research and the mental toughness concept does allow me to keep this flexibility, to be prepared for what we don't know is going to happen. And Johnny is spot on that it'll work out. But we don't know how, but it will.